다 드랭 아주 네 살아대. 드랭 아주 내리 주셔야 돼. 제당 그 남주 자다와 그 찾지 아주 다들 신도 오바가 냠민들이 얘네들은 믹서게 아니 다 개bio 유도 자네 아니 내 춘도 어디지 마. 근데 지시는 삼성시.
So we normally meet on Monday to do our Sukhavati practice. And I'm also thinking that I want to take advantage of having an interpreter to give a brief teaching also this evening.
다들 주셔야 돼. 무지개 주대라. 아니 대신 신도 냠네. 다시 먹어와. 들이 땅에 들은 운동 주세네. 아니 주셔야 돼. 라간데 시행이시나 아니 나와 가다가 사자 예시. 아주 남바가 백개지 뭐지 제일. 대행에 망을 주잔들에. 들이 시행이시.
So our main practice this evening will be the Sukhavati practice that goes without saying, but then also this I want to give a teaching, an explanation of the view of the 4 seals that make something a Buddhist teaching. 4 seals that attest to a philosophy being that follows the guidelines that Buddha set down. And so a brief explanation of that also this evening. So that's what we're preparing for now in our preparatory stage.
어디든 있잖아. 내 남자 준도 개 친구거니 지난 초라 나 추가래 시게 요리시나. 다 공동주야 다 개침버리 중의질래장 운동섭 숨바나지. 아니 담보 지난주들은 주니니 값이야. 아니 참에 공동 넘버 답아도 되면 거네. 공동세야 돼 간드지리시나 남건 타다냐 버심지 탐지게 치등에 들은 주된 인간이 님바 난싱에 라린 똑네 들은 중대 심지 인동의 치등에 라린 똑이 인상봐. 나랑 기부의 치도 잠만이 봐 남건 타다냐 버심지 그 치든 인간이 인상봐. 어떤 데 공동다 되면 거네. 신호시.
So as I often mention, the preparatory stage is more important, more profound than the practice itself, because that's the intention, the motivation with which we go into a practice, and that really determines what will be the outcome of the practice. And so here the motivation is to think of all living beings throughout space, wanting happiness, wanting to be free of suffering, and wanting to take responsibility oneself here. This is the intention we're setting, the motivation to I myself will listen to these words and do this practice with the intention of bringing all living beings to happiness, guiding them to happiness, and so that I'm going to listen for that purpose, and then I'm going to put it into practice to actually accomplish that. I'm going to use it for that purpose of benefiting all living beings throughout space. So it makes a big difference to adjust our intention in this way, to set a pure, vast intention like that at this point.
삼로지 땅나시. 아주 삼로지 땅나. 다 랑주 세반 잠벨랭 멋직라 동한 내 동한 누구 있어야 멋지요 말이. 잠벨리는 무랑 가제오나 멋동서 가제오나 참아도 대완돼 봐. 동한면 돼 봐. 지와리. 디 대화대 내가 칼라사야 유잠 잡라 주야 유잠 지 배샤지 유잠게 아니 지 강바단지 다 릭잠고 첸들은 릭잠게 대화도 된게요 말이다 다 대화는 타르도 봐대 다 아주 유드니 연거리 나와가다 그 사제 이나네 대화는 타르도 봐대 사제단 저 동화 주되든 양엘인데 봐 시와스야 양엘인데 봐 시와스 가두 톱날 되니 못이라 아니 대화대 대화 오막 대화대 되니 못하고 요래 티 심지 때나 대화대 되나 찌어 말어 심지 때나 대화대 되면 탑시 내 트레이닝식이 삼바 아니 지금은 심한 촉 눈이 바쁘신 심지 때나 치의 제자 강다 삼바지가 다 듣지 그로 만져 봐다 아니 공동 주셔야 돼 삼바든지 당거래시
So we should adjust our motivation in this way, thinking that there's no one, no living being, no person that really wants suffering from the depths of their heart, that want happiness. And so here we're thinking of providing the happiness for them, but this happiness is not just the happiness that comes from temporary things like having enough to eat or enough to wear, enough money. That's not enough. What we're really looking for all living beings is a permanent, inexhaustible happiness that comes from realizing nirvana, from liberation, which is part of the subject of the four seals that attest to a Buddhist teaching that nirvana is peace. This nirvana is ultimate happiness. So this is the happiness we're thinking of, not temporary happiness, but to provide all living beings with the ultimate happiness of nirvana and the causes for that. And the idea is to get actually moved in such a way that you feel that so strongly that you get goosebumps, or that tears come to your eyes as you're thinking of the state of sentient beings suffering and wanting to free them from that. So that's the ideal, to cultivate these ideas, these attitudes, until we feel very intensely moved by like the hairs in the back of our neck kind of go up or something. It feels like, and tears come to our eyes.
든지지게 아니 삼로 땅에 다들 공동 주스게 요리자데 든지 삼로 땅에 아니 무시 추대 아버지 신호시.
So taking a moment to generate and sustain that kind of motivation, then listen to the instructions.
당아주 남부 추대라. 지난주 가시기 시요라 가시 시요마다 남부 추시야 돼. 배마시 땡사보 사바당 자치와 아니 든지 시작해 요리지.
Now many of you must be aware, maybe others not so much, but that teachings of Buddha are very profound, meaning they're deep, not always easy to understand, and they're extremely vast in their scope.
슬락바르데 아니 남부 추대 베베 남부 추대 자니 마윤적에 단 날린다 그 추주 근데 제인도 자네 아니 라바다 따득 유바 아니 전타 유바 근데 배출로 침버지리지.
And in particular, the Tibetan Buddhism comes through the lineage of the Indian Buddhism, in particular the monastery of Nalanda, which was renowned for having pure view, philosophy, as well as the application and practice of that.
다들행에 중의지시야 돼. 아니 나와가다 그 사제 이해해야 돼. 만도도 시야인지.
So I want to explain about these four seals that make a philosophy teaching of Buddha.
다때 하 고야도 개치 모르지.
So it's really important to know these things
간신의 지난주 출라 가오 지금 나왔지.
because you like Dharma, right? Buddha Dharma.
엔지민이 하 고고르지대.
So it's really an indispensable subject to know about.
배나 낭바다 낭바 마인바게 치바라 서화 낭바 치발 가르게 치게 요리시나 따와 땅 주반이게 돈이 시게 놓았지.
Now, whether someone's a Buddhist or not can be analyzed and determined from the point of view of their view of things, their philosophy, and their conduct.
배나 주바가 돈이 가르세 요리시나 짬로고 돈이 다당아주 짬내 공효성 켈리바이나 아니 낭바이 짬내 공효성 켈 말랑나 산지 주다 겐도네 타완데 바 남지 잡지 디 산지 주다 겐도스음다 켈 말랑와이나 아니 낭바 말레시 다 주바 돈이 짬로고 세가도 와시.
So the determining factor in terms of conduct is refuge. Does someone accept that if someone really wants liberation, they must rely upon the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and do so themselves, then they're a Buddhist. Otherwise, not. So that's, in terms of one's actions or conduct, that's what determines it.
배나 또 주로 임박하네나 바체 Buddha Dharma Sangha신의 바체 노카워래 말해와 배는 직디 고바본도 긴다지다 가시에게 진이마다 나와다 아니 잠소다 라다 아니 낙찰라 소바다 아니 라 참조다 완쇼다 근데 꼴라야 안 잡선 징이 되도와.
This is unique to Buddha's teachings. Other spiritual traditions and religions have other sources of direction and refuge that they accept, such as a creator God, the sun, the moon, the ocean, the forests, the Brahma, Indra, and Vishnu, and other deities.
대인들자네 산지에 되라 아니 라양 콜 중라 징바 인직딘라이 수시 잡았네. 대외 강라 잡나 물어와 꼰초 잡로 자세라리시. 라리 심지 sob된 바나나.
So in the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, there's one verse that says, how could a worldly god such as Brahma or Indra, one who's caught in the round of existence, free you from samsara, cycling of suffering? So better than that, rely upon the unfailing jewels of refuge of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. This is the practice of the Bodhisattvas.
대인들자네 다 점로되게 주부터네. 다 낭바인다 마인데시. 아니 따부터니 아니 따와가다가 사대 이 디콘시도.
So this is in terms of conduct. But now in terms of view, one's basic philosophy, now that comes down to whether one accepts these four seals of four virtuous seals or four pure seals of purity of Buddha's teachings.
따와가다가 사대 이제서야 돼 간들이 지시나 다 맹마랍데 뇌세담제 못아봐 사케담제 동하와 취담제 동시 남이봐 양일인데 봐 시와시.
So what are these four? Just to name them first, is that all that is compounded is impermanent. All that's contaminated is suffering. All phenomena are empty and selfless. And nirvana is peace. These four.
양일인데 봐 시와. 대인들자네 다 대게 담보 두제 탐지 마다 봤어야 돼.
So first this, that all, all that's compounded is impermanent.
당가란주 잠벨렌시나인다 다들지 참아대 마다 버라지. 마다 버리지.
So now all of us and the world around us, we have this nature of impermanence.
다들 마다 버텔라양 아니 라빠 마다 바지당 아니 차와 준지 마다 바시. 마다 발니 시에거도시.
And impermanence can be thought of in two categories: gross or rough impermanence, and then subtle impermanence of continuums.
배나 락범마다 반다지는 아주 참인 통연도 왔지. 배나 메시아당 아니 마게야당 배나 또 니마게 드랭 배나 또 두sun다지나 깔마게 지니 아니 깔마게 지니 추추게 지니 아니 니마게 지니 아니 둔타게 지니 다와름베 이도 두sun도야 메건 통야 메시아 아니 지 니든지 감네 지 차야다 주야라 소바 참아데 메건 통수여라 마다 바라 니든지 감나 코 메건 통사라 응으스 다지 마다 바 응으스 띵데야 디 코르테 아니 라빠 마다 바레 메건 응그 통도 아시가세.
So gross impermanence is the impermanence that's obvious to us, that's manifest. We see people, things die, pass away. The passing of time, that we can see on a clock, how seconds add up to minutes, minutes add up to hours, hours to days, days to months, and months to years. That visible passing of time that we can measure and see its passing. That's the gross impermanence.
Or
also, and then also, Rinpoche mentioned seeing people age. The visible change of age is also gross impermanence. And so that the end of birth is death. As soon as one's born, one is headed for death. That the end of meeting is parting. That the end of accumulation is exhaustion. These are all gross impermanence. So it's easy to understand, it's very obvious, visible to us, right? But subtle impermanence is very important to understand, the impermanence of continuums.
Pena majima chili kapsani shwate ko zupo nyamde drubkhala nyamde yuyu khala pena zupo la tmachindwa ti tmana bote tenda chi ko chiwe zupo ti yoni sunde shwe tmate nyamde yuyu khala rita.
So this is a kind of impermanence that's always with us from very birth, just like our shadow. It's never apart from us.
Ta kadu chi sheong siate ta te tchungi banga chi labshi ko marwa kadu tongri kadu shigri siate.
And if we have to say, when we're going to die, we can't. It's we can't say exactly when that time is going to be.
The name chane ta ti junje madaba tela pena duze sine dushin seba jujin la tine pena jujin ji la tine ani we bo ji indu chane ani ti we bo den ji ju la tawa indu chane ani duze sine xie ge yu de xi chen do wa.
So things being fabricated or compounded is talking about the action of causes and conditions. when causes and conditions contribute to the arising of something, this is a compounded phenomena. It's a fabricated substance of object of some kind. And from the very moment of its creation, or our creation, we are in a constant state of flux, momentary flux, constant state of generation and disintegration that is going on from the very moment that we or anything is born or created. So, if we point our finger at a particular case, like me, for instance, and if you were to ask, is the Rinpoche of yesterday here today? And if you ask that, well, the tendency might be to say, yes, you're the same person. Rinpoche was here yesterday, is now here today. But considering it more precisely, less.
But
if we think about it clearly, precisely, then we say no, that the Rinpoche of yesterday is not here today. And that's because my body, the continuum of those atoms and molecules in my body, they're constantly changing. They're constantly undergoing a state of change. The past is finishing, the present moment is being created. So in the case of the cup, we say, is this the same cup as yesterday? Our tendency again would be to say yes. But if we examine the continuum of the substance's own continuum in time, then we'd say, Lotus? And we'd see that the moment of the past is no longer with us, and there's the constant generation of that present moment fading away into the past. And so this kind of impermanence is the subtle impermanence. It's the impermanence of a continuum. Things that look like they're solid, permanent, staying the same, but when examined more closely in terms of time, you can see that they're not.
담보 라파 준지 마다파 인장 아니 코 마다 차와 준지 마다파 인장 아니 라파 마다파데 아니 남지 챤도 와시 빼나 매지나 담보 민강라 지 아니 나 망보지 레네 아니 워 쳬거도 뭐세 가시 토비하고 벼워 쳬거도 와 대간지 용거지나 아니 담보 주포데 빼 답선도 나 아니 라파 차와 준지 마다파 진주로 망보진도는 나네 아니 kon 타마 아니 라파 준지 마다 바데게 아니 워키네 시거도 와시 어 된다지 고 타와 준지 마다 바데 메나 라파 준지 마다 바데 용시야 요 말이지.
So if it wasn't the case that there was this subtle impermanence going on all the time, there would not be gross impermanence. There would not be then the visible change that we can see. because that constant subtle impermanence is going on, then people can die. And sometimes it does happen all of a sudden, but often you can see it come gradually, get pain or suffering or sickness, and through that constant change in person, in the body, is going on at the level of the subtle impermanence.
Dadela Shipsavi Sama Tambaina, Dodewake, any Zuma Dutin Chami, the Shibakichi Chamis in the Chami Yagadoasi. Zuma Dutin Chami, Shibakichi Chamis. That Kawajinji Madaba, the Martina Palm the Cups.
Now, in the context of examining this subtle impermanence, there is one Buddhist philosophical school that comes up in the consideration, which is a Vaibhashika school, one of the Shravaka philosophical schools, which does accept partless particles of matter as well as partless moments of time. And so that has to really be scrutinized a little bit more deeply at this point when looking at subtle impermanence.
Today, the Pena, Kangla Tony Romana, Tela Tamji Romarjusi. Ta, the Nichi in the Tane, Kangla Tony Romana, Tela Tamji Romarjusodoa. Ta Tende in the Tane, Nambake Ranga same Tombani, some Shaka Yomari. Nice Sipe Chu also to Bandea Tombani Risi. Nubo Tama Tombani Risi Shakira. Tombani go Jumsin Kalatoita, some Yapuchita in a Tombani go Jumsin de Tarbe in the yard of the oh Tombani go Jumsin in Duzeno. Duze the Jutin Latine, Chig Latine, Tinisua, Tinchin Revanjoa, Duze Siate, Mataba, Upin Jiguba, Chigla Chig Tinioa, Tinchin Revanjoa, Yuba, Kanshi Yuba Tela, and Tombani Imba. Ta take Duzi request in Rogodoa. Koti, Tawanin and Jigumeli Cheke, Kongupo Timboji, Tartin Tezokinjina, Kotela Tombani, Runguyumai, Tela Tombani, Joshua Yumai.
But not looking directly at that particular subject, but the idea in Buddhism that whatever is empty functions. Whatever functions is empty. This is one of the profound points that Nagarjuna brings out. And when you think about that, what does it really come down to? It comes down to this point of this constant compounding, the impermanence. It comes down to thinking about impermanence and how something is created from causes and conditions, and that each moment then creates the cause and condition for the next moment of that phenomena. If it's in the case of a continuum, that each moment is a cause for the next moment in time of that continuum. And so it shows you that there's nothing solid in there, that each part is just dependent upon the next part, and so where are you going to find it? And so emptiness really comes down to this same kind of awareness, that things are in a constant state of flux. And so therefore they don't have any solid, independent self. If they did, this kind of change would not be happening. There would be this solid, some kind of solid thing to find that would be findable. But that's not the case according to Buddhist teachings. We say that it's because of emptiness, things being empty of inherent or self-existence, that they can function. So if you think about this point of the cause and effect and how it's going on at that subtle level continually, then it leads you to that understanding. So this is that first point, how all compounded things are impermanent. There's a lot more that could be gone on with that, but we'll leave it at that today because we also want to go on to our practice.
Today the Chane, that they get the Zetan Yamadaba. That's Saki Tamji, don't have Asia, and you bought a tell you where you is.
And then the second point, the second seal of a Buddhist teaching or Buddhist philosophy is that whatever is contaminated is suffering.
Saki Tamji don't have Asia. That's Sapa that Duze Chula, Saki and Sami Sinishi. That Chuchi like Saki the Sami Sinishi.
So a phenomena can be either contaminated or uncontaminated.
Ngachu Tata Le Tang Numong Yimang to Japa Pumbo Ake, Lu Langne, Yunwa Teke, Jule Tang, Deva Numongba, any depart Donga Lasopa, Ti Lega Cha Tawate, Karisina, any Sapat Jiba, Sakies.
So in the case of our own body and life, for example, or a body and life that's, or any phenomena that's created from delusion and karma, deluded karma, and it's contaminated. It's considered to be, this is what contaminated means here when it's our five aggregates, the five aggregates of our being, they arise from ignorance, attachment and aversion, the delusions, and then actions motivated by them. If it's a result of that, then it's contaminated. Those five aggregates are the form, our physical body, then feelings, perceptions, concepts, consciousness. So we say that is the nature of suffering. And now when we talk about suffering, then a lot of people might sometimes disagree. Sometimes people disagree, don't recognize that, and say, no, there's nice things in life. And this is not just saying that all of life is suffering. It's not just that simple. So this will then bring up that subject of the three sufferings, the three categories of suffering. So these three aspects of suffering is one, the pervasive or underlying suffering of karmic conditioning, and then the suffering of pain and the suffering of change.
So
about this suffering of pain and suffering of change, suffering of pain in particular, doesn't require much explanation. Everyone can recognize it quite easily.
Pena dungar che dungarasi. Dungar che dungar sendi chane dungar tangbote tate shego ajumsi yore. Dungar che dungarasi nami tupak ndda jana kai da chako chese doa. Dungar che dungarasi dungar ni de yan thwe ni jumsi kare dungar tangbote kare. Dungar tangbote tangbo ni ni churan chizam ni ni ani chaban duji dungar yuba. Dela tingi yore dungar che asi. Ti dungar la tine ani dungar si dungar tamadeke ani jure dungar tang ani jure dungar deda dungar ji dungar te ni yong yure si dungar che dungar se ya tera pe ko ji chimbo yure dungar tambo te ke chaban de ji dungar ti dungar tamadeke ani jure dungar te dungar ji dungar ni te ting do asi
nisha nisha ta dos Okay, so in the name of this first type of, or the suffering of suffering, really, in the Tibetan it's exactly the same word twice, suffering of suffering. Why is it put that way? Why suffering of suffering? Suffering of, what is the first suffering? And so the first suffering is this pervasive suffering of karmic conditioning. That basic lack of freedom is the suffering, the basic suffering. And then the suffering of suffering is then on top of that, then extra pain and torment and so on. And then plus the suffering of change, being drawn to something that looks pleasant that then changes into suffering again. That's on top of the basic suffering of that karmic conditioning, of karmic formation.
Then the Chane, Sachetam Dong Hawas, that Dungar Tela, Ta Munek in Jura Dungar, Tamada, Dungar Dungar Town, Jura Dungan in Dugamina, that in Dugu you marry, Dungar Saman Dugu you marry, then in Dugamina, and in Chaban Dusi Dungate. Jung and Tartoba, Nibak and Tartoba. That day in Batu Musin at the kitchen bodies.
So, if we don't want suffering, if we don't want to be run around by this constant searching for happiness that turns to suffering, that suffering of change, and then we don't want to experience the suffering of pain, the suffering of suffering, we definitely must recognize this deeper, pervasive level of the suffering in karmic formation, just being subject to karma.
I think Duzi Dongharte, Tan Duzi the Dongharte Chan Chiego Yona, that Demba Yignani, that Kumjong Pamar Sasiat, Kumjong Pamar Sas, Lake, Naranju Leta, Sumi Zik Namto, Numonta Lele Chine, and the Dongarjuara. What the day to Chane, any Kumjong Pamar Sas, ta Danzita, Numonta. And in the Chai Shida, the more loss of a new mumbo sort, and the Captain Jan, that is our in the Bangladesh. That dilemma to Jimba Tamshimedawasi.
And if we want to be free of suffering, if we want to get rid of suffering, then in the context of the Four Noble Truths, that's what 4 points seem to be true by highly realized beings, Arya beings. The second point, the causes of suffering, about that Buddha said, the causes of suffering must be abandoned. And so, what are the causes of suffering? The karma and delusions. So it's karma and delusion that must be abandoned in order to completely free ourselves from suffering.
Tende du chane ta dunghar se du chane ma mambo chige dungha telani khapte chane dunghe mili che de monab ja tata ngale dungha chi lep cha dungha lep chale de nyam de ani chi monab ja ya tan chi ta damda se ne ta dungha la khapte chane dungha te chung ge chawan de chi la sim ne ma mambo chi de sang go yuri si.
So a lot of people are when they focus very strongly on suffering, when some frustration or pain or suffering arises, then they want to fight it. And they want to challenge it, try to get rid of it some way, once the suffering has fallen upon them.
Dungar mus nyonja da phashe de tadange chiranchul dungar ke ja shi de phache gahal ndo khaw mare se o da te da ngala mugos tang ko mugos dungar se shi de chane chik se na.
And even to hear about suffering, it may be a subject we just really don't even want to think about. Say, don't talk to me about suffering.
Ta tiri dungar te pe na lep chali kapse dungar te ta ngara lep charwa.
But once the suffering's there, it's already happened.
Tende indu chane lep chali kapse ani ta thapsi kane chi si gorsina ta maung bala ma lep de thapsi. So
So once that happens, then what we need to do is to use that suffering as a means to prevent future suffering.
다들 동할 용화 때려양 동할 때 독자진 소모도와 빼나 자세 진부 시와라게 동할 그 용tin 송도와 동할 용tin 가르시나 이야 동할 용tin에 조에 뜻바서버시 코와팔라 니지지 딕란 제임신 게라 가스 동할 그 용tin 마모지 송도와 동할 렙자드.
And once that suffering has arrived, as far as its actual presence in our experience, we don't need to think of it as something bad. Shantideva pointed out qualities of suffering. Once we're experiencing that it diminishes our pride, that it causes us to feel compassion for others, it makes us want to avoid non-virtue and accomplish virtuous actions. So there's a lot of good qualities to it once we have it.
Let Sally Capso any same joyatang, any that don't have Dokia in Saba, any don't have a capita non trees.
So to fight it when it's happening, the suffering is kind of a mistake. It's just to be frustrating.
Don't have Suzurisina, don't have Sosuras.
So who made that suffering? Oneself. We did.
Jimsing Aisina, Sosu Dipasa, Sosu Numong Kun Langde, any Sosu Dipasa, and the duality in the Tonghata Yongorasi.
Because at some point we created a harmful action, and then that created the cause for this suffering that we're experiencing. So this is that how all that's contaminated is the nature of suffering. Second point, second seal.
Now, is
there a way to destroy suffering or not? What kind of method could there be? What sort of path?
So
now that comes in the next seal, which is that all phenomena are empty and selfless. So this acts as the antidote to suffering. And not just because it acts as an antidote to suffering, but because it acts as an antidote to the causes of suffering. So when we say the four measurables, or we do that prayer, the words "and their causes" are particularly powerful. And we pray, may all sentient beings have happiness, and the causes of happiness. It's not the same as just wishing that all beings have happiness. Also, that those words or the understanding it brings in, that they're thinking about what are the causes of happiness, then makes it. It's more potent, it's much more profound thought. In the same way, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So that the word causes is very powerful. There's a lot of meaning there. So really the direct antidote to suffering is wisdom that realizes selflessness.
다 뉴몽당 뉴몽라 타라망보 뉴몽바데 시럽 이시지 메가 방거래지 뉴몽발라 아니 몰람잡네 가서 뉴몽발 매쇼세 왔잖고 뉴몽바 매도고 말이지 내가 나기 뉴몽발라 몰람잡지 몰람세야데 생게 심송 zanwa, simji, mulam sim송 zanwa. Deki, Numongu Mugni Bolot, Numon Seate, Karitin Somarisina, Sim can Gardale. Tony Kataba Mantunka so, Danzi, the Lichika Sony, Dinzina Soma in the Tani, Tiki Nimbo Koranga, Sim Koranga Tony. Nimbo the Yani go the Tani, Numon, Shirab make a pons on the song was. Shirab Seate, Tata, the Chutanchi Dami Basia, teaching the Logodosi.
So Milarepa,
or
Ashantideva, in one verse says, "Oh, delusions, it's devoid of the eye of wisdom." So first of all, saying delusion twice is referring to there's various levels of delusion, but the main point then is that it's devoid of the eye of wisdom, and because the eye of wisdom is that wisdom realizing selflessness, and and when that's developed, then it cuts to the very root of delusion, that very our own instinctive sense of duality, self as opposed to other. That is what we must cut through. We make a prayer. Already there's a sense of duality in operation, right? So we need to see through that subject-object duality, understanding selflessness, and that is what then really cuts the very root of the delusions. Because when the delusions are present in the mind, those states of mind that disturb the mind, that are disturbing, that are afflicting, that ignorance, attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, all these, they operate when that self-grasping ignorance that clings to self is operational. So the direct antidote to that is the wisdom that realizes the absence of that self. And so just by praying, be free from delusion, that won't actually accomplish it. Now we say all phenomena are empty and selfless. And Rinpoche did make a reference to this before also. He was talking about selflessness is not just in terms of living beings, but also other phenomena. But when we speak of selflessness, we can speak of two types, two varieties, general selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. So selflessness of living beings and the selflessness of other phenomena.
Tawala Pardujuba, Tamchin Chibala Pardujuba, Tawala Pardujuba, and it new movement deba. Tamchin Chibala Pardujuba, Juba, any shivs deba. The new movement deba, the shivs deba, Nitela, any that the Nike Pachete San Dogodoasi, the Ni Pachete Yagan and Dogodosi.
So in understanding selflessness, then there are basically two levels of obscuration that need to be destroyed, need to be removed. The obstacles to liberation, obstacles to omniscience. So the obstacles obstructing liberation, which is the delusions, ignorance, self-grasping ignorance, are abandoned by the Shravaka practitioners, and so this is the kind of nirvana that's attained by those of the Hinayana, whereas the subtler level of obscurations to the understanding that selflessness are the obscurations to omniscience, which are abandoned by those of the Mahayana in order to attain full enlightenment of omniscience. And those are they're more subtle. It's the imprints of that ignorance of self-grasping. So both of these levels of obscuration or veils must be overcome or fall away in order to realize complete enlightenment, selflessness in its ultimate sense.
Pardin lama sanap konale, Tavin tina mongbe shibar saasi. Tape dumdeo gone. Ti toni the kari jo kari ten toni the togo ta. Tombani the jo kari ten togo sina. Any chosa. So she tabo chosa se. Tanga to the reina, tapena chosa si, the Zadawa Tavarashila Mulam Doga Yuri. Any longa is sungaton, any depa panga yuri, shakwa shigi yuri, shakwa shigi yuri, chuban bugi yuri, any chick tada ngatu de yina dumbakan and the in the Sansawa and Chuba, the shakwa, the Jissi, tea called take a chosa and roya, chosa, any druba jansi. Any chosa, the reona, any social dipa the drubatam matan, yon the drip yura. The dumatan, the chosa, the badabati, tan. Ta te su lam ting gersina zawa lama. Ta gang ta jang lama cheding ji la ting. Lama cheding de ke chosak thap. Druba jang thap lam tende ji la ting ne lam ti gang yang roya drone ani tomba ni de tuen de to go yore si. Ta dinan de song do.
And so then what is the path to realizing that selflessness? One simple summary of it is to have a qualified spiritual guide, and through the practice of accumulation and purification, then we will realize that ultimate truth. And so, besides the studying and listening to teachings, it's necessary to apply ourselves in that way, to purify our karma through practices of accumulation, such as the 7-limb prayer and all of the different parts of it, such as prostration, offerings, confession, and rejoicing, and so on, can all be focused on and done intensively. But they're all for this purpose of creating more and more positive energy, more and more merit, as it's sometimes called. And as that happens, and applying ourselves physically, verbally, and mentally in that, and as that happens, then we'll become more and more purified, and that will help to alleviate, clear away those obscurations in our mind to understanding.
On the name of Jane, Takanda the Tomba ni Togona, Chosa, Dipata. The Drubuna, Tomba ni the Tony the Jetogu Maris. When the Duke, Drubaka partition, Tony the Jetogu Mara, Tomba ni doing the Totu Mari, partition.
So we need to do this accumulation and purification in order to realize selflessness and emptiness. If we have negative karma and obscurations in our mind, that will obstruct us from seeing it, from being able to understand it.
하고 소에 그 나와 띵진 전정듯이 돈이 그 따와 돈반이 그 나와 띵진들 완전한데 차마 돈반이를 또거나 돈이를 또거나 그 나와 띵진들 돈 지와 메발 마도 바시 디 돈도 차마 돈반이 가라 또거나 지와 메바시나 돈반이를 또거나 초니 신등 방로라시 초니 시야 그 사기 수남지 초당 의미 이시지 초 기완데 지와 그 수나이시 초사데 수나이시 레정와 담바근이 도바시 손이와 디츠베 사기 수남고 초다 의미 이시지 초 디초니데 신당 방로的 지바시 모락 콜로的 지바 신등 콜로的 지바레시 모락 콜로 찍가는 로트고 말아 랑콘 콜로 찍간 로트고 말아 칼 콜로니고라 파나천나는 콜로니 디난신세네 아니 송나 아니 니마 찍라 아니 추랑라 당가라 동반이 무고시네야 동반이 쳤지 그래지 디니 모델 추랑 동반이 무고세되네 동반이 찌인 그래지 추랑 주라 가인신의 득득차마 다 차와 딜로바가 나로바 전에 송도와.
So one time the Mahasiddha Tilopa said to Indian Pandit Naropa, says, if you want to understand emptiness, birthlessness, the unborn, this is not going to be the poetry probably, but okay, that you need two wheels of the cart. Then you won't need me anymore, it'll come to you. So the two wheels of the cart he was talking about was that accumulation of merit and accumulation of wisdom. You're creating more and more positive energy and more insight, wisdom, accumulation. Then that's how we proceed. That's how we arrive at that destination. He said to Naropa that, when you have those two wheels, then you won't need me anymore. It'll come to you.
Emptiness, wow.
So to understand that the unborn, the selflessness or emptiness.
Tati cho ni se adela sakye sunam ko cho la jimba sutum zeba ta parsin tu ja gen da jimba sutum zeba zundu de sami ishi la yang gori sakye suna la gori zundu ni ga la gori jimba sutum zeba ani something di nga de ani sakye sunam ko cho la ani mimi ishi ji cho de hirap 파신 쪽은 아니. 아니 준비돼 니가 가져라. 의미 이시지 초라야 준비미는 그 말이 사키 수남지 초라 준비미는 그 말이 파신 쪽은 아니지 않는데.
So if we think about the six perfections in terms of these two accumulations, the six perfections of the bodhisattvas are giving, ethics, or pure morality, and then patience, perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. The first three of these, giving, pure morality, and patience, and then plus the fifth one of concentration, are all the accumulation of merit, or what's sometimes called the accumulation on the side of relative truth. And then the wisdom, final perfection, is the one that specifically pertains to the accumulation of wisdom, that insight into selflessness. Now the fourth one, perseverance, applies to both. It's useful on the side of the accumulation of merit and relative positive energy on the side of relative truth, and then it's also important in the wisdom accumulation for the effort to be applied there. So we can say that these are like the two wings of a bird, that we would be able to fly to the state of enlightenment. Also would be another example of thinking that both of these are necessary for traversing the path. And by doing this, then our negativity becomes purified. And one day we'll realize that selflessness, emptiness, shunyata. And even when you say, I don't even want it anymore, you'll have to understand it. You will understand it, even without wanting it.
All day the Johnny, that day, she don't dami, but young in the bus, don't you dami basia. That did young in the Bashwasia, that don't you get down or Matisha, is Tamatic, Yande Shwasia.
So then the fourth seal is that nirvana is peace. So here is where we really get that explanation of shunyata, selflessness, the path to it.
Nyande Seatela, Nyande Chimbotan, Rimota Chungus in the Shiado, Sipen, Nyande, Tatatela, Nyande, Mnep, Yang in the Basia, Sanjika Kompang, Tate Omala Shikuris.
So there are different types of nirvana, 3 different types they could be enumerated. But here we're speaking particularly of what's called the non-abiding nirvana of a fully enlightened being, a Buddha. So we'll just speak directly about that.
Tatela Nachita Munam Jayaris, Namjik, Nirvana Sina Sanjika Kompamane Yandete, that Sindela Mato Jima, Munam Jayaris.
So this is the ultimate aspiration of our prayers, whether it happened in this life or future lives, to be able to attain that the non-abiding nirvana of a Buddha.
And
that day we really attain the ultimate in bliss and happiness.
But
until that time we really have not attained ultimate happiness. Because we'll still be cycling through these different levels of suffering, 3 types of suffering.
Yeah. And that taking a the day Karsate. Our Kadaka Sada Yen don't do go in any answer of mind, the Shishu Nasi.
So this is a brief explanation of these 4 seals that attest to something being a philosophy that is in accord with Buddha's teachings, or it's part of Buddha's teachings.
Chirtan Namjung Achiza Dawala, the decision that the Yamin Sikayuri, Chushira Shake Yomaris, Yineteren gave you Yabo Yuditane, young people Tadublan Delita, Nimbakashi Yuri, consultees Hakona Samang, Dorduchi, the Shays.
So usually we take more time for practice, but I wanted to take advantage of speaking with interpreter in the hopes that some of, especially the more experienced people, would catch a few things from these instructions.
Because today we have a very good translator, I just explained what is
4 seals.
Words Tawa Kadaka Sari.
Tawa
Kadaka Sari.
The 4 seals that attests to something being a pure teaching of Buddha. I always figure out, try to figure out how I'm going to say that. So it's the words themselves. Tawa, view.
View.
Or philosophy. Tawa. Karta, zangwa, Kata, pure.
Kata te madati kata mada.
Kata.
Kama kana ya kata.
Kata.
Lotus.
Okay. So there maybe it's more in the proclamation kata, the way you propound the teachings, and then chagya means seal. It's actually the same as in Mahamudra when you say chagya chempo. Chagya seal, the seals, and then shi 4. These 4 seals of a Buddhist philosophy. We don't need the pure, but what it does is basically it places a philosophy inside Buddhist teachings, and if something doesn't accord with that, then there's something that's in discord. There's something that's veering off from Buddhist teachings.
Yeah. So
we'll do this now in a brief way, Sukhavati practice. So we'll do it in an abbreviated way this evening.
那你是章啊
So
page 25
25, Nish Sangha. We'll start on 25.
Namo Amitabha Nejai Dene page 80.
Skipping to 80, page 80.
80. 80.
Manerve.
La.
Lotus. Emaho.
Emaho.
So the second line on page 80.
Tadandera salba kashichi doa telange tadanga chundeni. Tachin chuba xiam yi den dunba de yang ndordu jinge ma ndashe shuginshi.
So in case there are some people that are new, I want to explain a little bit about the offerings and the recitation of mantra that we do here.
Ta pepe nambu chula ani zawa sumsiyade lama yedam khandosi.
In Tibetan Buddhism, three roots are also considered to be very important, which are the Guru, the Yidam, and the Dakini.
Slabja zawa lama, udabja zawa yedam. Ani parche sevak, ani zawate, parche sevak zawate, ani khandosi.
So it's said that the Guru is the source of blessings, of inspiring strength, of inspiration. The Yidam is the source of siddhis, attainments, common and supreme attainments. And the Dakinis are source for influence that clears away obstacles and hindrances on our path.
Tadadandi tankade Amitabha, Amitabha,
So now our scroll painting, or tanka, is one of, it's in Sanskrit, called Buddha Amitabha. And in Tibetan, we say Sanje Upag Me, which would translate as the Buddha of immeasurable light.
Nga zawa lama jabje sanje tenji rinpoche kong dang kong ka zawa lama ta nga ka juba nda se ko marawe ta nga ka zawa lama juba yedam tanda kide yurisi ani nga ka yanda nyamni shiki yusi.
So this yidam, or this meditational deity that's practiced very closely, is what is passed down through our lineage from my guru Sanjay Tenzin Rinpoche, and all of the gurus leading up to him. This was the special deity that was the practice of our lineage, and up to myself included. And this is the practice that we do every Monday here.
Offerings in that the Chua Jebanani, Chu Argam Batten, Pipi, Dipe Alok, and Gidin, the Shabdas in the Yongo Doas, Chua Koran and the Yongo use. Offering that Chu Batten is.
And these are offerings, and as you can see, the row of offerings in the front, they correspond to the offerings that are made in the prayer, which are water for drinking and for cooling, and then flowers, incense, light, perfume, food, music, and other offerings.
Oh, the name is Anne. Oh, Tanga to the Jaga Slopshop, any buyer. That's all, any that are pollen organs at the ne. That in the Sine, Pebala, any Tabarashila, the Chinchin. So you did to do that, dead Zamari, Pejiba. And
it's this practice that I do with my Tibetan students also, in South India, in Portland, East
Nepal.
And Nepal. And not just this, but an even more extensive practice of Buddha Amitabha that takes all day long to recite, starting from 7 in the morning till 7 at night.
Oh, the day the Tane, Tan de Latine, Natawalamala, Yamyo was serious, Yamusin and Yamni. Flat the Nichi Latine, and it only got our Julichin. That in the Senergy. Tanga Yichipayus. Delan Yamni Sevaina, and this was a jewel, a Kankan Sankachi. So
I've had really first-hand experience, through of the transformational power of this practice. To be able to realize selflessness. For instance, in my teacher, I know he had such deep understanding of that, of selflessness through this practice. So I know about the power of this practice from direct experience.
Oh, the day this ane, Tata Danga Om Ami Deva Shes, then the Badaman, the Tata Caps. The Om Ami Deva Shes, the Candilisina, and in Beda Amitabha, Sanjo Obami, Koranka Sok, Naranto in the Metal Menura, Pen Natural Mina Sabanta Sinsi and the Pema Dromos and the Chi Menkiura. The Om Ami Deva Shes, the Om Amitabhas and Sanskrit. Sanskrit Ma Pale during the Om Ami Deva. That doing Chipari can't touch Sanjo Obami can see Singadang.
So we're going to be reciting these 6 syllables of Om Ami Dewa Shri, and it's basically the name of Buddha Amitabha that we're calling, just like we have names that we'd be called by. Amitabha is the way that the Sanskrit Amitabha Buddha is translated into Tibetan. And so basically it's the name of Buddha Amitabha that we're reciting.
And it layang, and in us young and the Senate, and the young Golijum the young Rinpoche, Powang Limbu Dantan nearby, and Yimsi to do now, Cheer Paman burned the Dunyangla. Powang Limbu Dantan nearby, Yimsi to do now, so Sora top song Yuri. The lady Tane, and then nearby young and the Seda, and this was a sin layang, and it's Yushitayata, and it's Lalayang, Dung Shukura, and it's Owataba, Pachonka Malam Baby Dunyang Tada. Young,
and we'll recite it with melody, in keeping with some instructions from Guru Padmasambhava, that when doing recitations, it should be done like a child calling to their mother with the beauty of flutes and lutes, and flutes and violins. We should make the prayers, requests throughout all the periods of day and night, 6 periods of day and night. And so, the meanings that come through that is that by chanting, it is transformative for our mind, for our attitude, for our bringing up that emotion of a child calling to their mother, and then it being beautiful, like the music of flutes and violins, is also then an offering, and it is said to bring more swift attention from the deity, that the deity will be more swift to act, more swiftly exhorted to act through hearing the beauty of the chant. So we visualize the deity in front of us, in the whole pure land, the whole abode, and other holy beings, as we recite the mantra and do the practice. And then at the conclusion, Buddha Amitabha dissolves or melts into a red orb of light that then comes to the crown of our head and merges down through the crown of our head to our throat and then into our heart, purifying us of negativity of body, speech, and mind, and unifying us with the enlightened body, speech, and mind of Buddha Amitabha. So this is the basic practice we usually do.
다 때다 냠데 아주 곰 깔망알아 자긴 신남중 아주 제반되는데 곰텔에 자기 요 맞들은 도르도 진되는데 요더니 아니 호암 모남시만 되는 게 되는데 전에 곰 도르도 지 자기 곰 잘리 값어 다 곰보 오바미 마회도 쉬네 아니 지난주 용아 이섬당 곰보 오바미 거성 통대 지와 차성 삼바 아니 곰보 오바미 그 있으나 송그스나 아니 투지스나 거성 투지스나 차성화 등 거랑 톱성 삼바 어떤데시네 상마던데시 따따 망보시나 따 제단 혼주 시기를 니 맞아서 니 맞게 다 사바하시도 어떤데시네 깔망알고 온다 효시다.
So, visualize Buddha Amitabha now, melting into an orb of light that comes to the crown of your head and merges with you, purifying your body, speech, and mind, unifying with body, speech, and mind of Buddha Amitabha. We'll conclude with the prayers and dedication after this, but first let's take about 5 minutes to meditate.
Susan, you have this paper.
All of us.
Yeah.
Now, the sheet for a guideline here is the inducing the Dzogchen view, and so this will be the instructions for meditation, which some of the older students might know already.
다들 윤에 나게 남자 윤데 단대 냠는 시기 요시 다배 핀보 생나야 핀보 시빈도 없다 나야게 단 너드바 드드 너도 사만디나 창대지지 생나 핀보 시빈도 없이 지난주에 남자 윤데 냠는 데서는 야보에 살이 싫어와 다들 이제 전에 남주는 소만 된 거요 대마지 뜨네 아니 되는데 곰네 가만 알았는데 지효시.
So, when I meditate, these are instructions that I think about. I would highly recommend it. It's in a brief form, but very inclusive, a lot of meaning there. So, I highly recommend it for instructions for meditation or for going into one's meditation.
배낭어서 두가나 되되 nga lo ni hitaki thola lo sum dawa sum nyama sum lo sum dawa sum nyama sum na ani nga lo ni hitaki thol dukan de ri ti ka sung za wala ma de ke mayin sia de ma yin sia de show chi le tene ani jang ge thol jar ngara rung ngarang khamba chung chung na na mayin sia chi de le te ani ki chin dang de thap chang na na te ani sam chu de na na te 마행 세는자네 책 비니 이래는 통도자네 마행세 되는데 가려임 봐 로게를 soloko 야보 요나 돈이 그 따와라 아니 냠샤세네 돈이 그 따와 만나 마행세야 뒤책 뭐마 되리데 이네들 마행나야 딕박 솔라 남도 담다 삼마당시 게베 솔라 로츠 고르시야 책 코랑 띠 비니 다네 동생데 마잉 시야 빼 피모도 시대
Can you,
말로니 hit작직 돌 주간.
So, when I was 21, I did a long retreat, extensive retreat of 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, and this was 그냥 니마 타바디 덤이요.
단 던시는데 책도 마잉 시야 돼 가사가 돼요. 근데 응아 잡아라마.
And the first words of this prayer
마잉 시야 돼.
그냥 잡아라마 트리버래.
응아 잡아라마가 뒤네 던시 자리 가사가라.
So my root guru wrote these words on placards for me to post, and I had one right in front inside my retreat room wall there. And so the words themselves, "My Ying," the first 2 words of this prayer, which means "don't wander," and then also in the kitchen, same thing, a sign there, in the latrine, one there, everywhere. And they're such powerful words, because what it really means is, don't wander from what? Remember shunyata, remember the ultimate nature of yourself, of your own mind, of shunyata. But if your experience is up to that level, or on the other hand, it reminds you not to wander to the harmful, the delusions, the demonic bandits, the side of negativity. It reminds you not to wander to the side of negativity. So always being reminded of that constantly. It was very powerful to have. Always be reminding you of that.
Yeah.
So let's recite it in English now. Don't wander, extend mindfulness. On the path of distraction lurk demonic bandits. Attachment and aversion are the demons. So look at the illusory nature released from duality. Primordially pure, unfabricated, one's own mind manifesting. Buddha is nowhere else. Settle right where you are. Not seeking it elsewhere. Settle in the natural state. Without meditation, spontaneous established, enlightenment is attained. So let's meditate for 5 minutes.
Dema Jata Chonga. Andan Jata Chonga. Hold on.
115, page 115.
Thank you.